When I was a kid, I loved dressing up for Halloween, as I'm sure many of you did. If you're a kid of the 80s like me, you probably remember those really kind of creepy looking small plastic face masks that were so super uncomfortable to put on. You tied the string behind your head and put on a cape or a top or something to go with them. To us at the time, they were so super cool. You wanted to be Batman, so you put on Batman's mask, or Iron Man, or Spider Man. Masks were cool to us. As an adult, I don't dress up in costumes quite like I used to. Maybe a wig or an outfit every now and then for a theme day at school or a special event or something, but wearing a mask as an adult just doesn't seem to have the same appeal as it did when I was a kid. What's interesting is this. If we look back at the historical times of things like plays and musicals, masks were actually made to show emotion. And I think about the character masks that we used to wear and how those faces were just kind of straight lips and no emotion. And, if you would talk or you'd try to smile or something behind them, people couldn't tell. The dramatic masks were used to show emotion, not take it away. If you look on a simple Google search, you'll find comedy and tragedy, the simple masks that portray laughter and sadness. That's because masks portrayed emotion. People wore masks in those productions because they were playing a character that was supposed to show emotion. A few years ago, masks became commonplace in our society. We all remember when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, we were required to wear masks to even go to the store and anything really involving daily life. And while I understand the need for them, it really caused us to take for granted how important face to face interaction is in life. The reality, however, is that it didn't take the pandemic for us to wear masks because we were already wearing masks every day in our lives, just not physical ones. So many of us wear masks of sorts, things that are designed to prevent people from knowing our true selves. We wear masks to present an illusion, to make it seem like we're living the perfect life or at least a life different from the reality we're living. These masks are sometimes decorated with titles or possessions or achievements. Think about your response if somebody were to ask you this question: who are you? Most of the time, we'd respond by describing what we do for an occupation, or maybe we'd share that we were a parent or a resident of a certain town, or maybe part of a certain club. But those are things that don't really tell who we are. We shy away from describing who we truly are, or we avoid it just because we don't want people to know, or we can't hear ourselves saying the words out loud. Last week, I asked a very loaded question. When you look in the mirror, what do you see? Well, this week, I have a question that may be just as important, or maybe even makes some of you more uncomfortable than the one I asked last week. It's one that stems from our identity, our daily interactions, and what we want the world to see. The question is this: what mask do you wear? And you might be sitting there saying, I don't wear a mask. I have no idea what you're talking about. But the fact is, none of us are perfect, and all of us wear something. We're just days away from Easter, and when I look at the Easter story, I think about the masks that are worn by so many people that were a part of what happened during that time. Many people in the week leading up to Easter wore masks because they were afraid of being discovered as a fraud. Let's take Judas, for example. Let me read from Luke chapter 22, starting in verse 3, and this is the Message version. Satan entered Judas, the one called Iscariot. He was one of the 12. Leaving the others, he conferred with the high priests and the temple guards about how he might betray Jesus to them. They couldn't believe their good luck and agreed to pay him well. He gave them his word and started looking for a way to betray Jesus, but out of sight of the crowd. Picking up with verses 47 and 48, no sooner were the words out of his mouth than a crowd showed up. Judas, the one from the 12, in the lead. He came right up to Jesus to kiss him. Jesus said, Judas, you would betray the Son of Man with a kiss? Bible scholars that I've read analysis from say Judas was way more than a betrayer, identifying him as a hypocrite, a thief, a liar, somebody who was very greedy. Judas put on various masks depending on the situation and the environment. He pretended to be somebody different based on who he was with and what purpose it served. His ultimate mask led to the arrest of Jesus. Well, what about the religious and government leaders in this whole story? To sentence somebody to death, the Jewish leaders had to have the Roman governor's permission. So Jesus was taken before Pilate, who didn't know what to do with Jesus. Because he didn't think he had done anything wrong, he sent him to Herod. Herod was pleased that Jesus had been arrested and questioned him, but Herod sent Jesus back to Pilate as he didn't know what to do with Jesus either. It was the custom at the time of Passover for the Roman governor to release one Jewish prisoner chosen by the people. When Pilate asked the crowd who they wanted released, the priests stirred up the crowd, so they called for Barabbas to be released. Pilate washed his hands in front of the crowd as if to say, I don't want the blame for this. So many scholars, leaders, and government officials tried to corner Jesus, tried to find any reason to incriminate him. Jesus knew that the religious leaders of that time were all show and no substance. In Matthew 23, he calls them hypocrites and blind guides. Let me read you some of his words. This is from Matthew 23, starting in verse 2, and this is the New Living Translation. The teachers of religious law and the Pharisees are the official interpreters of the law of Moses. So practice and obey whatever they tell you, but don't follow their example. For they don't practice what they teach. They crush people with unbearable religious demands and never lift a finger to ease the burden. Everything they do is for show. On their arms, they wear extra wide prayer boxes with scripture verses inside, and they wear robes with extra long tassels. And they love to sit at the head table at banquets and in the seats of honor in the synagogues. They love to receive respectful greetings as they walk in the marketplaces and to be called rabbi. In other words, they were wearing masks. But why? Did they feel threatened by Jesus? Were they truly concerned he was not who he said he was? Or did they really see God's masterful plan being fulfilled before their very eyes, and they were terrified? Jesus knew their hypocrisy was hampering the faith of God's people. What Jesus did was reveal the mask of tradition that many of the religious leaders wore to promote their own power and comfort. They wore the mask to make themselves seem more important than everyone else around them. They wore a mask to exercise authority over people. They wore a mask for the purpose of financial gain. They wore the mask to make others think they were closer to God than others. They were wearing the mask of tradition rather than living out the tradition. So, how does this all apply to us? How can we apply this in our daily lives? Well, there are many lessons we can learn from masks. The ones we choose to wear, and the ones that have become part of our lives so much we might not even be aware of it. Well, one thing I think is so prevalent for so many of us is that rather than confronting reality head on, we are prone to want to hide. From the very beginning, when Adam and Eve disobeyed in the garden, they hid. Why? Because they were afraid. Have you ever been to the filming of a TV show? Like in person, like sitting in the audience? I haven't, but I've seen documentaries on the filming of shows, and it's really fascinating to watch behind the scenes footage. There's so much you don't see that goes on behind the scenes. Like the fact that maybe when a certain scene is being shown, all of the other actors, the crew, etc., who are off screen, what are they doing during that time? They're not necessarily paying attention. They don't all stand around as like a big audience. Maybe they're rehearsing their lines. Maybe even they're eating. Maybe they're completely disconnected from what's actually going on. The camera shows you what they want you to see, not everything else. With masks, we show people what we want them to see, and we're prone to hide the rest. But think about how our lives would be so much fuller, our relationships so much deeper and stronger, if we allow the people who love us to see more of us, more of the real us. Many people go through life wearing a mask, thinking they are fooling everybody, even God. Why do you think so many people do this? Maybe they fear the consequences of being found out about something. I picture them saying, well, if so-and-so really knew who I was, they wouldn't like me anymore. Or if I let people know this fact about me, I won't fit in. We wear masks for lots of different reasons, a lot of times way deeper than just hiding something we don't want people to know. Masks are worn as a means of protection from being hurt. You think the masks are allowing you to be accepted and a part of something, but in fact, they're causing you to be withdrawn when all you really want is to be accepted. We really need to recognize what masks we are wearing in order to remove them and run the race God has called us to. Ask yourself this question: why am I doing what I do? I know that's kind of a loaded, very broad question, but many of us wear different masks on different occasions. Maybe we're wearing a mask of love but have a face of hate. Maybe we're wearing the mask of generosity but have a face of greed. Maybe it's a mask of strength, but on the inside we're weak. Masks of gossip are often worn to shed light on someone else's shortcomings or unfortunate situations, but in reality, we're just doing it to hide or minimize our own. Masks of pride are worn to make others think that we have it all together. Unfortunately, these masks are usually hiding the fact that deep down inside, there's a mess going on. Masks can even get so severe that we wear masks of addiction to cover up pain and deep wounds, when in fact, all the masks are doing is causing more pain and deeper wounds. And no matter how good we think these masks are, people can usually see right through them. The masks we wear hinder our relationships with the ones we love the most. They rob the world of seeing the real, authentic person that God created us to be. So, if we're wearing masks, if we're pretending to be something we're not, or doing something we know we shouldn't be doing, why is it important for us to take off our masks? And how can we get rid of them? Why do you think it's so important to be honest with ourselves and honest with each other? Well, first of all, we're called to be honest in all of our relationships. The scriptures tell us not to deceive one another, calling us to speak the truth to each other. If you think about it, lying even about oneself is incompatible with a Christian walk. If we're wearing masks that are covering up major issues in our lives, then we can't receive help if others don't know we need it. Yes, to a point, people can see through our masks, but what about the person who smiles all the time? But in reality, it's all a show. And deep down inside, they do it so people don't know the hurt, the sadness, the insecurities they're really feeling. How can people support us if we mask our pain and pretend to be just fine? I think too many of us are afraid to discover the benefits of unmasking our struggles. As a middle school teacher, I can't tell you how much I see of this every day, especially in the last few years. Maybe it's just we're afraid of being different. Maybe we're afraid people will talk. Maybe it'll change our social status. Have you ever had somebody ask you how you're doing and you answer them with great when you know deep down inside things aren't great at all? How did you feel after that? How do you think they responded? They they think everything's great, so they're just going to greet you and move along. Or did you ever answer with, okay, when the person asks if there's a concern, you tell them no? What would happen if somebody asked you how things were going and you said, things aren't good at all? What if we openly spoke about our struggles? I often think about a dear older lady that used to attend church with us who would always come and ask how people were doing, even people she hadn't seen in a while. And somebody said they had a concern. If they took off a mask and allowed their vulnerability to be visible, just then she would stop everything she was doing and pray with them right there on the spot. To think being honest about our feelings and emotions allowed others to pray for us, to intervene on our behalf. It's because allowing ourselves to be honest, to be vulnerable, allows others to be honest and vulnerable with us, too. If we admit that we're human, that we grapple with things in this life, we often give others the opportunity to do the exact same thing. I know confession of something is a difficult thing. It's a difficult discipline for us because we all too often want everything to be just perfect, and we're afraid in the eyes of others, things aren't going to look that way. We feel the world expects us to be perfect, believing everybody is a saint before realizing we're really all sinners. But in reality, our honesty gives God the glory. Here's why. The Lord Himself said, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." God is glorified by our weakness because in our weakness, we can become fully dependent on His sufficient grace. Many of us go through life hiding behind masks, but God calls us all to honesty. I think that's because honesty brings us transformation. And transformation ultimately brings us to a greater sense of peace. Taking off our masks frees us from the pain of pretending. The masks we wear hinder our relationship with God, and Christ wants us to take off the masks. Once we remove the masks we wear, He can go in and heal whatever we have that we are trying so desperately to hide from others, from ourselves, and ultimately from Him. Underneath it all is the real, true, uniquely beautiful you that the world needs to see. The masks we wear don't help us or those around us. They're uncomfortable and tiring. So if you're wearing a mask, if you're pretending to be something you're not for the sake of someone or something, I understand. It takes courage to remove it. Will it be scary? Probably, because you have some truth to tell or show someone. Will it be painful? Maybe, because there will probably be some need for some relationship mending and some grace and forgiveness from parties on the other side. Will it be worth it? Absolutely, because your intimacy will grow both with God and the people who truly love you. They will know and see the real you. So what happens if we choose to keep the mask on? Well, in time, whatever we're hiding or our personal agenda will probably be revealed anyways, in one way or another. Odds are it'll be much harder to deal with, and we might stumble or fall. So today I encourage you to consider taking off the mask. If you don't know where to begin, take a minute to pray about it. I'm going to pray with you right now, and I hope you would say these words with me if you're struggling with this very thing. Lord, I want to remove the mask I've been wearing for so long. I want to be accepted for who I am and not for what others want me to be. I want to show the world who you want me to be. I'm sorry that I've hidden who you made me to be, and I ask that you help me to see myself the same way you see me. Amen. Take the masks off, whether it's one or many. Friends, the world needs you just as God created you to be. No lies, no fakes, no masks. Just the real you. Well, we have one more episode in the Images series. Next time we'll be discussing the cross, one of the most powerful images in history. As we lead up to Easter, if you're listening to these as they release, note that our next episode will come out on Good Friday, just before Easter. For now, friends, it's been great being with you again, and as always, I really do appreciate you taking time to tune in this week, and we'll see you back here next time, and we'll have more for you on cue.